Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. We're back. Starting the weekend with watches, and everything you see is for sale. Many of these watches are not listed on our website. For questions about pricing, email me directly, tmosso@thewatchbox.com, for any inquiries about these watches. The holidays approach, and I'm looking to build inventory. Buy a watch from us? Sure, but also sell or trade a watch to us. We pay cash, we pay fast, no upper limit on value paid. We will buy your entire collection. Remember, to buy, trade, or sell, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. All right, guys, one last inventory show before Dubai, and then the channel is back to normal. As I mentioned in my notice that I posted, I'm tapering my activations, even if I maintain my production schedule behind the scenes, because I need videos to last me through Dubai while I'm out of the office. But after Dubai, everything goes back to normal. This is going to be our last inventory show before I leave for the UAE. And start the 1812 Overture, because this is going to be a blockbuster, the best one we've ever done, starting with a latter-day legend, 42 millimeters in stainless steel. This is officially the Apollo 13 Anniversary Edition. So 45 years since Apollo 13, this is a Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch everyone calls the Silver Snoopy II. As you can see, it is a tribute to the character Snoopy from Charles Schulz's Peanuts, and the Snoopy Award is given by astronauts to the best suppliers, contractors, and employees of NASA as recognition for a job well done. Well, you can see the image of Snoopy on the dial, all white and black to match the comic cells of the funnies in which Peanuts would have been published in American newspapers. You can see there are individual cells, 14 of them, representing the 14 seconds that the Speedmaster Professional was used to time the firing of retro rockets to guide the crippled Apollo 13 spacecraft back into orbit and back to Earth. So the Speedmaster Professional was integral to that effort. We have a few notes that reference the actual mission, and then a few that reference the film, as this quote, "failure is not an option." That's from the Apollo 13 film. Now, each of the individual hour indices is a solid block of luminova with black on top, so you see them in relief. And we have blackened hands at center. We have Snoopy himself over in the constant seconds at 9 o'clock, and then we've got a tachymeter scale that is a ceramic insert. The whole thing is very elaborately loomed and absolutely spectacular. Turning it all over, the best is saved for last, or at least the back, as this limited edition, and it is a limited edition of 1,970 pieces. Take a quick look. Sterling Silver Snoopy, AG 925, carved and engraved by hand. This is a handcrafted watch. It sits on a base of deep blue grand faux enamel with metallic elements added to create the image of the cosmos. Of course, eyes on the stars, the motto of the Silver Snoopy Award. Turn it all over, and the watch wears like a standard moonwatch, caliber 1861, Lamagna based inside. We've got a custom strap here, a combination of white stitching and a black textile with black calfskin leather on the bottom. Probably the most sought modern Omega timepiece, and easily the most inventive limited edition Speedmaster Professional. A really cool watch. Now, if you want to go upscale and even pay a little bit less money, let me recommend this as the alternative. 100 pieces, 40 millimeters, stainless steel, a 2018 launch. This is the Mont Blanc 1858 Mono Pusher Chronograph Limited Edition. Now, the timepiece features a way ahead of its time gradient sunburst green dial, so silver green at the center, dark forest green at the edge, cathedral style vintage inspired hands. We've got a tachymeter scale outboard, and the watch, of course, is a wearable size. Unlike so many of these Minerva built Mont Blanc chronographs, this one is actually built for a normally sized human wrist. You can see caliber 1321 written on the dial, and this is one of the Villeray Mont Blanc watches. The standard mass produced watches come from Leloc, and the high horology watches, just like this one you see here, those watches came from the Villeray manufacturer. Minerva, previous to Mont Blanc's purchase, only making a few hundred watches a year to the highest standards, and that's exactly what they continue to do under Mont Blanc. They have such name value that they actually maintain the nomenclature on the chronograph bridge. Taking a quick look at the movement, caliber 1321, big slow beating balance. 18,000 vibrations per hour. You can see a black polished swan's neck fine adjustment, handmade overcoil hairspring. We have a very traditional column wheel, lateral clutch architecture, and take a look at the degree of finishing. How much black polish, that is every surface that turns black and then silver as I move it through the light. How much can you see here? It's blinding and overwhelming by its sheer mass. It's not something you're used to seeing in large quantities. The edge of every steel and brass component has been mirror beveled and gorgeously, as you can see. There's a little devil's tail point that's a signature of Minerva chronographs, and you can see that on the component of the chronograph that interacts with the column wheel. You can see the regulation of the levers, horns, yoke, and recentering hammers from the driving wheel, which drives off the fourth wheel of the escapement, or I should say the movement, all the way over to the instantaneous jumper for the chronograph minutes. There's a lot to love here. This is finish that's best in the industry. Minerva finish truly is as good as Patek Philippe, and I would even say in a watch like this, which is built in far lower volumes than Patek builds, for example, 5170s or 5172s, the finishing on this is going to be to a higher grade than you will find on Patek Philippe's series production chronographs. It is very, very special. Let's do one last close hold shot of this case back. Guys, I talk about anglage and Côte de Genève and satination and black polish, but it all blurs together sometimes. This watch is exceptional. Yes, it has all those things, but executed to a degree you will rarely see. You can even see that there's a little ratchet wheel capping the barrel, and that has been spiral solarized. You can see that just below the devil's tail point. Tons of interior angles where bevels meet, and an easy watch to wear. At 40 millimeters in steel, it's a perfect fit for my wrist. Most of the Villeret chronographs are huge because they use enormous pocket watch intended calibers. Not this one. This one was built for the wrist, and it is magnificent in that regard. Now, sticking with watches that wear well on small wrists, what we have right here from Kurono Tokyo is the Toki Second Anniversary, a special series designed by independent watchmaking maestro Hajime Asaoka of Japan, and he builds high horology watches, but through Kurono, he builds watches that are more accessible. So if you saw the Mad Watch that Max Buser created for friends of the brand, this is along those lines, but a little bit more, emphasis on a little bit more accessible. The watch was made available for a brief period, 10 minutes, on the 21st of May, 2021. They sold out. The order book was closed. This is an example. Now, Asaoka designs the watch to fit his aesthetic sensibility, a modern watch designed after the Swiss dress watches of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. 37 millimeters in stainless steel, automatic winding with a Miyota movement. The watch has a lovely salmon dial. You can see Bunkyo Tokyo, that is the ward of Tokyo in which his design atelier is located. And then these lovely polished gadroons with indices at the quarters. The hands, as you can see, are an original design, and the watch wears beautifully. As you can see on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it's a rare way to get into boutique horology with a watch whose retail price was about $1,200. Now, of course, it's going to cost a little bit more than that used, but it's still going to be far more obtainable than, for example, the Silver Snoopy or the Minerva that you just saw. A truly special watch with a design that will stand the test of time. Now, if you want to go upmarket and bigger, may I offer this 2021 release? White gold. This is the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Chronograph, frosted gold, with a Florentine hand-chiseled decoration created in partnership with jeweler Carolina Bucchi. You can see that it is a very intricate drill-based etching, a sort of tremblage effect across the bezel, the case, and the links of the bracelet. And whereas a standard Royal Oak bracelet takes about 9 to 11 hours to hand finish, this adds innumerable additional hours. And you can see there's wonderful precision in the finishing, with the bevel on the edge polished, and then the tops chiseled, and then the edge vertically satinated. The watch also weighs a ton. It's a very imposing thing, both to the eye and to the touch. The watch includes a Grande Tapisserie dial, which, as you can see, is black galvanized, cut on a pantograph. It's an inverse panda with silvered registers and a black dial base. The watch uses the latest in-house Audemars Piguet chronograph caliber 4401, which is a 70-hour power reserve and a flyback chronograph. On the wrist, this 41mm watch wears fairly large. I'm not going to lie, it's more like wearing a 43mm round watch. I wouldn't wear it on a wrist smaller than 15 centimeters circumference, but you can see it wears well on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. Now, the watch, of course, is far whiter and brighter than any natural white gold ever could be. If you look at the watch, you can even see that the bolts in the bezel are an unplated white gold, which is why they're this warmer color, and then the rest of it is just blazingly silver white, and that's because after it's been hand finished, it's actually coated with rhodium to give it a platinum-like appearance, and with the solidity, it actually feels as though it might be made of platinum. It is white gold, though. There's no doubt about that. Column wheel, vertical clutch, in-house caliber 4401. Finally, a display case back on the Royal Oak chronograph. The Frédéric Piguet movements are gone, replaced by a properly sized and handsomely finished AP caliber that has a full balance bridge with a free-sprung index to be tough. It's 50 meters water resistant with a screw-down crown, so the watch is surface swimmable. It is a remarkably impressive thing. Again, holding it in the hand, it feels almost indestructible, like it'll last forever. And that's exactly what we want from our luxury watches. Now, jumping around in terms of price point and geography inside Switzerland, Longines, and a throwback launched in 2009. So the original Longines Legend Diver came out in 2007, and it was a throwback to the Longines super compressor dive watches of the 1960s, a super compressor case designed by Erwin Piquerez, a Swiss company that created the internal rotating bezel and then the sealing system. They were used by many, many companies, and we've seen versions of the super compressors reissued by, among others, Longines, JLC, IWC, Vulcain, but this is one of the best executions. Now, after 2007 came 2009, when the version you see here with a date was introduced. So the watch is actually quite well loomed, 42mm in stainless steel, and you can see that the little index on the bezel is also loomed, so you can set and read this watch in the dark. Now, it has two different crowns, both screw down, 300 meters water resistant. One is the internal rotating dive bezel, and the other crown is used for operating the movement. It's a 28242 automatic winding, 38-hour power reserve, both stop seconds and a quick set date. The watch has both features, and it's true to history in most regards, though it has a more modern wrist stance because of the 21mm spacing between the lugs, but you can see it has a dramatically cambered box section sapphire that looks like a plexi, a thin mid case, no beveling on the lugs, squared off ends. This is a watch true to history in many regards, and you can see right down to the skin diver on the reverse side. It echoes the Longines super compressor divers of the 60s. Throw it on my wrist and you can see it is a big watch. It's over 52mm from lug tip to lug tip, which means you're going to want at least a 15 centimeter circumference wrist to wear this one, but it is high style and again very accessible in terms of price point. No lack of pedigree from one of the great brands in the watch business, and Longines may have the best archive department of any watch brand. So not only do they reissue their history, but they cherish it, they cultivate it, and they preserve it. Crossing the border for a moment to Germany, we talk about a watch that launched in 2008. This, 42mm in white gold, is the Glasuta Original Malt Tourbillon XL. Now, the first thing you can notice is that although it does have a retrograde date indicator, the panorama datum, that is the namesake of the Pano series, is not actually present, which is a little bit curious, but this watch is easy to forgive because it's so beautiful. Now, you can see it has a half and half dial, half opaline, silver white, and half black. It looks a little bit like a New York black and white cookie, and there's more than a little bit of a shade of the JLC Gyro Tourbillon 1 in the design of the dial, and there is absolutely no compromise with engineering that would do JLC proud. We have a flying tourbillon because, remember, it was in Germany by Alfred Hellwig in the 1920s that the flying tourbillon was invented. It is a German tradition. We have a open dial side with no upper bridge to block the view. That's why it's a flying tourbillon. We have a filigree wire style hand-finished tourbillon carriage, and then you can see a handmade overcoil hairspring. Also appreciate that the capstone of the balance staff is a cut diamond. So this is a very rich watch indeed. There's a power reserve indicator. Power reserve is 40 to 42 hours manual wind, and you can see on the reverse side it is quite handsome with a good deal of fine finishing, including both blued and black polished screws, satinated wheels, and pivot jewels set in golden chaton fixed by screws. You can even see that there is a dramatic solarization on the ratchet wheel, so a lot of beautiful hand finish here, and you can see that some of the elements on the case back have been laboriously engraved by hand rather than engraved by a drill. You can see this is hand engraving on the reverse side. The watch includes a full white gold deploying clasp, and it's actually quite thin. As you can see, it's not a thick watch given what's inside, a couple of complications, and yet it's low enough to fit underneath the cuff, and it's elegant enough to be your dress watch, even as it's relatively low-key. It's sporty enough to be a casual watch, not a sports watch, but a sports casual watch, where you're going to have that effortless, languid look around the club, around the boatyard, perhaps near the pool, but not in the pool. This is a watch that dresses down just as well as it dresses up. And I should mention, though it doesn't have a lot of lume, it does have some. Let's talk a little bit about Stepan Sarpaneva. Back in 2012, he launched a version of his Corona K0 called the Woski, and this is it. A limited run watch that's nominally 46 millimeters in diameter in steel. It's inspired by an article of Finnish folklore of a smith who progressively designed more and more complicated apparatus to rescue his kidnapped daughters from a sea demon. Now, if all of that seems a bit tangential to the ownership experience, you're right. The reason you buy this watch is because it's made by one of the great independent masters of our time in a style that couldn't be mistaken for anything but his own. It's beautifully executed with a more is more philosophy, both inside and out, and it's often difficult to pull off complexity, whereas simplicity, though beautiful, is often easier to work with. This watch starts with a dramatic scalloped case and bezel design, alternately satinated and polished. We have a dial that is open with a grill on top of a blued base. You can see part of the Soprod movement inside, and that Soprod A10 is a 42-hour automatic winder that has Seiko roots but is effectively a drop-in replacement for an ETA 289-282. Now you can see Stepan Sarpaneva's own glare, as the moon phase is his signature complication, and he usually incorporates his face into it. So the quickset system for this movement's date has been replaced with a quickset system for the moon phase, which takes the form of a shroud around Stepan's face up at 12 o'clock. The watch is also quite well lumed, as you can see. It is a sports watch. It is 300 meters water resistant, so this nautically inspired, or I should say nautical folklore inspired watch is definitely swimmable. Look at the crown. Look at that triple row knurling. This watch is like nothing else. You can even see that the man's own face is on the strap, which is a correct and brand new factory piece. You can see K0 Woski, and you can see on the dial side, lots to love. Sarpaneva's name on the nameplate, and his watch on my wrist. Surprise! Although it's a 46, it wears well on my wrist and would probably wear well on a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference. You can see it is super flat with a sloped bezel, so it's going to slide easily underneath the cuff. This watch surprises. Most 46 millimeter watches are going to be like an IWC Big Pilot. This wears more like a conventional 42 millimeter round case. Patek Philippe. It's not always the best of the best in every category, but it finds itself in the running for the title of best all-around brand, regardless of category. Dress watch, sports watch, new, vintage, male, female watches. These are always fantastic pieces. You never get cheated with a Patek. An average Patek is an extraordinary watch, and an extraordinary Patek is singular, and that's what we have right here. Launched for 2020 based on the 2015 5370P. This is actually the dash 11 model of the watch. So 5370P-011, and it's blue Grand Faux enamel, and that's really the hook with this version. Like the original, it's 41 millimeters in ultra white platinum, and it has a Grand Faux dial, but the original was black. Blue is tougher to pull off because the dark colors show every imperfection. It's a sign of how far Patek has come, both in case construction and dial construction, that it's able to pull this off without any visible flaws. Now you know this is a special Patek because it has applique white gold Breguet style Arabic numerals. The watch is a split-second chronograph. You can split the seconds, flip it all over. By the way, it's coaxial split because the split is triggered by a pusher that's in the crown. Turn it all over. Caliber 29-535, 65-hour power reserve, and it does feature hacking or stop seconds, that age-old absentee in Patek movement, finally accounted for. So 65 hours of power reserve, handmade overcoil hairspring, 6-position adjustment. You've got not one, but 2 separate column wheels, and the column wheel for the primary clutch has been black polished on its top. The movement beats away at 28,800 vibrations per hour, and as you can see, it has a wonderful depth about it with a glorious forest of springs and pincers associated with the secondary bridge for the split-second complication. The watch is surprisingly useful, as it does include a little bit of lume. Throw it on the wrist, and it's large by Patek dress watch standards, though by no means oversized. You know it's a platinum Patek because it has that diamond between the lugs, the way platinum Pateks do. The timepiece needs a wrist of 15 centimeters circumference or larger, but it wears well on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, and you can see that it's pushing right out to the edge, but it's not there yet, and it is quite flat. The bezel is concave, so it's going to slide underneath the dress cuff. This is probably sportier with the blue dial and the white metal case than the original black with white metal, but both of them are fairly versatile, and with a combination of lume and a tachymeter, surprisingly sporty for what are, at face value, fairly committed dress watches. This one actually can gear up a little bit, and as with the Glasuta we saw just a moment ago, you can wear this casually. The watch also has instantaneous jumping minutes and every refinement you could possibly desire in any kind of a high horology watch. Inside and out, this is a stunner. It comes with a matching platinum clasp, beyond belief, and the first one that I've seen of the blue dial variant in the wild. Oh, Vacheron, perennially the best buy among used Holy Trinity watches, and this beauty was launched back in 2000. The Malt Perpetual Calendar Chronograph, 39 millimeters in yellow gold. It's only 46 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip and 13.9 millimeters thick. The watch launched in 2000 using the same basic caliber that you would have found in a Patek Philippe 3970 of the time, Le Mans based, with a perpetual calendar and chronograph, column wheel lateral clutch, very traditional, but with a little bit more of a vintage-inspired dial than the corresponding Patek. We've got broadsword hands, half frosted for better contrast, applique dart-style indices, and engraved moon phase, so this watch really has it all. Add a hunter case back, and it becomes quite special, because you're not being shorted the gold. You have the gold case back, but you also have the display case back. Combination of solid and sapphire, giving you interior options for personalization if you wish to add a dedication or engraving. The movement, as with the Patek you just saw, is beautifully traditional, with a column wheel and a lateral clutch, and Vacheron's perpetual calendar module is on the other side. We have here a couple of features that are very old school, including a little jumper index, the spring that helps to instantaneously jump the minutes, a hooking guard. As you can see, there's a little wire that runs between the balance cock and the adjacent bridge, and that prevents the overcoil hairspring, which is made by hand, from getting hung up on the regulator in the event of shock. That's something you'll see on 1960s Rolex Daytonas, for example, but very uncommon to see today. Now you can see more than just a couple of anachronistic features that are charming. The watch is blindingly beautiful, as the standard of finish here is no less than on the Patek you just witnessed. A watch that exceeds superlatives, and this reference, 47112 in platinum form, appeared on Colin Farrell's wrist in the Miami Vice movie, so it's also a movie star. Surprisingly easy to wear. The watch is compact enough that you could see plainly it's an option for him or for her. A total boss watch for a man or a woman, and with those lovely welded-on malt-style lugs, a handcrafted case that has immense gravitas. Vacheron's great enduring styling tradition isn't necessarily a full watch design like the Royal Oak or the Nautilus or the Reverso. It's these shapely and striking lugs which run the gamut from severe to graceful depending on the model, but Vacheron lugs through the years have always had so much character, and that's exactly what we have here. Again, what would this cost compared to a comparable 3970 or 5970? This is the buy right here. We're not done with Vacheron. Upping the ante, we have a model launched in 2012. This, part of the Malt collection after it became a tonneau case. This is the Malt Tourbillon, and it's a very simple watch. You wind it up, it has two hands and then a third mounted atop a tourbillon. So the Malt collection debuted back in 2000, and initially it was what you just saw, watches with large, striking, angular lugs. Well, it was redesigned in the 2000s to become a collection of tonneau-cased watches, and this was the flagship. 38 millimeters wide in rose gold. It's 48 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip. and it includes an outstanding level of finish, more comparable to Grubel Forsey and Fernand Berthoud than what you'll find at Patek and Audemars Piguet. Take a look at this tourbillon. Now you can see there are two Maltese crosses in the cage. There's the upper cage and then there's the bottom cage, and each one features innumerable sharp interior angles. Yes, the cage is black polished on every surface, but they're also beveled internally, creating these sharp clefts where the two bevels meet. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, double that with the other side, and then you have this black polished, specular finished bridge that's continuously rounded with sharp angles where the rounded component meets the center. This is a level of finish that almost no other Vacheron includes, and when you turn it over, it gets even better. Caliber 2795, based on the old caliber 1790 from the early 2000s. Vacheron bought a company called Manufacture Haute de Gamme out of the Vallée du Jeu in 1998, and that gave them the ability to make in-house high horology movements, and that's where this know-how comes from, because Vacheron, for most of its first 250 years, was not a manufacturer. It was an établisseur. It would build up watches from parts that it specified and finished, but it was not a manufacturer. Well, this is all made by Vacheron, and you can see we have more sharp interior angles, and they're not timid or shallow. They are deep interior angles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It continues. We also have black polished screws, perfectly aligned Côte de Genève across the bridges, satination of the wheels. You can see two different sizes of engine turning, and then the Geneva hallmark on the movement. Manual wind and 1 minute tourbillon, 45-hour power reserve, but it's a big watch. You throw it on the wrist, and we'll throw it on my wrist of 16 centimeters, and you can see it's pushing right out to the edge. I say wear this as though it were a 43mm round watch, and you get the general idea, but also take note that it's quite thin, and it will slip underneath the cuff. So while it's a large dress watch, it remains a very viable accessory for dress attire. The hit parade continues. 2016, Grand Seiko launched its first micro artist studio watch. That was the Grand Seiko Spring Drive 8 Days in Platinum. Well, for 2017, they launched the watch in rose gold, and that's exactly what we have right here. This watch is the SBGD 202, 43mm in 5N red gold. It has a sensational, bottomless, glossy, metallized dial that's a combination of lacquer and galvanizing, with metallic elements added in to create almost the impression that you're looking at black aventurine. The hands, as well as the indices, have been finished manually using micrometric diamond-tipped milling tools by artisans who just create hands and indices all day for Grand Seiko. Now turn it all over and you see what these micro artist studio watches are all about, as we have a Grand Seiko caliber 9R01. Take a quick look at the architecture, because even the architecture is carefully thought out. We have the image of the mountains in the three-quarter bridge. We have the image of the mountains that surround the Shuijiri Nagano Prefecture Micro Artist Studio, a small division within Seiko, started in 2000. The division makes between 20 and 30 watches a year, because this is the equivalent of a Japanese Philippe Dufour movement. Not in design, he would create different bridge architecture, but in quality. The satination across the bridges, the quality of the bevels, which are not just mirrored, but an absolute mile wide with interior angles and exterior points. The folks who started the Micro Artist Studio back in 2000 actually went to the Vallée du Jeu. They visited Philippe Dufour, among others, looked at how they finished watches, and not only did they duplicate all of the tooling and techniques, they even brought back some of the wood used, the gentian wood, used to create the final mirrored bevel on a Dufour watch. Now there's a lot to love here from an aesthetic standpoint, from the beautifully blued screws to the mirror bevels to the handsome satination, but there's also a lot to love in terms of tech, as we have 3 barrels, an 8-day power reserve, a power reserve indicator, the unidirectional governing wheel, which is how every spring drive watch works, and you can see the perfect glide of the seconds hand. By the way, the watch does feature hacking or stop seconds. It is a smooth glide. It's not a Swiss lever. It doesn't stop-start. It's not a frequency of any kind. The springs play out through the motion of the governing wheel. The governing wheel creates an induced electrical current that wakes up a quartz oscillator. The quartz oscillator uses a magnetic force to govern the speed of the wheel, a feedback effect that will speed it up if it runs too slow by diminishing the magnetic force, and slow it down if it runs too fast by increasing the magnetic force. All of the potential energy in this watch is spring-based. All of the kinetic energy is derived from the springs, and the springs directly drive the hands. So it's basically mechanical soul, but with quartz precision. Full deploying clasp. Fun fact, these gold Grand Seiko clasps are made in Italy, the only part of the watch that is. Flip it over one more time, and you may be surprised to see this watch is 100 meters water resistant. Okay, I didn't see that coming, but it's nice to have. So this is effectively the equivalent of a Japanese Vudolinen, a Japanese Dufour, a Japanese Marco Long. This is a watch that makes no compromises. And with only 20 to 30 such watches being built, and that's all models built by the Micro Artist Studio, not just the SPGD you see here, this is guaranteed to be rare. It's big. You're going to need a big wrist. I think you need a wrist of at least 16 centimeters circumference to get the most out of this watch. So it's got the presence of a sports watch, but it also has the undeniable refinement of something that is truly haute horlogerie, or whatever the Japanese equivalent term might be. Meanwhile, back on the other side of the world, out of Lauberson, Switzerland, De Bethune, back in 2006, was doing incredible things. You think that linear calendar on the Patek Philippe 5236 this year is their own invention? Au contraire. This was the first use of a linear calendar on a calendar watch, the DBD. 42.7 millimeters wide in rose gold. The watch actually measures only 46 millimeters from lug to lug, so this pendant-style wristwatch wears quite well on a smaller wrist. Let me grab one of my polishing cloths here, because I want to clean this one up. There we go. This is my favorite De Bethune. Initially, I thought it was the DB28 Digital, but that proved to be too big. Then, I chose the DB27 Polo, but it was only a prototype. This was built, if we encounter all different metals, every single metal, a few dozen pieces of the DBD, the DB Digital, were created. It's based on the DBS platform that debuted back in 2005, and David Zanetta, the co-founder and design chief at De Bethune at the time, he was a vintage dealer and he wanted to pay tribute to the history of watchmaking in his De Bethune designs. So he kept the lug profile of the original DB1 case shape, and then he added a hinge lug at the top and a bullhead winding system to make it look more like a pendant. We have this lovely nickel anthracite coating on the hand laid stripes of the dial, laid down by hand with an abrasive wheel. We have a white gold plaque with the nameplate. We have the linear calendar of the day, the date, and the month. We have a scrolling minutes display. Look at this remarkably drilled and beveled crown up at the top. And then at the bottom, we have a jump hour display. So it is both a smart watch in the sense that it is thoughtfully designed, and a dynamic watch in the sense that you're never too far away from an exciting and beguiling jump of the display. But if you want to go slow, turn it all over. We have a fired blue Cosmos made of titanium, and then we have a spherical moon phase that is patented, along with the bluing of titanium. Those two processes, the spherical moon phase built the way it is, and the blued titanium patented by De Bethune. So this is a 1,122-year adjustment interval moon phase. Set it and forget it. So you'll note that we do have the Cosmos in the back, and the stars are laid down as faithfully as possible. We have dippers, we have Orion, and granted these things might not exist in quite such proximity in the sky, but they're present on the reverse side of this watch, which is beautiful and poetic. And you can see how one half of that spherical moon phase, and it is a sphere, is blued steel and the other half is white palladium. Inside the case, De Bethune's own caliber 2424 manual wind 5-day power reserve with their own proprietary hairspring, balance, and triple parachute shock protection system, their own patented twin self-adjusting mainspring barrels that cannot be overwound. This watch is overwhelming, and if it were not the rose gold model, which is a little bit too glam rock for me, I would have already bought it. I wouldn't be giving you guys this opportunity if the watch had shown up in platinum, and the day it does, trust me, it's going to be on my wrist before you even get wind of it. This is my favorite De Bethune timepiece. Having seen them all, worn them all, and now indirectly become part of the bigger De Bethune family, this is the one I want. But it's not the last watch of today's show. Oh no. We're going out with a bang. And we're starting with a big bang. Not the kind from Nyon outside of Geneva. No, that would be an Hublot. A big watch that lives up to its billing. Launched in 2007 at SIHH, this is the Lange und Söhne Lange 31. Technically part of the Saxonia family. In platinum, the watch is 46.1 millimeters in diameter, and it has a 31-day power reserve. The dial is gray galvanized. The dial's actually made of sterling silver. The indices, the frame for the date, as well as the hands, those are white gold. The case is platinum, and on the reverse side, you can see not one, but two superimposed mainspring barrels of enormous scale, truly enormous, to the point that they can only be wound using a key that inserts into the back of the watch. Of course, we have a power reserve indicator on the dial side, and a panorama datum, because that is the thing for Lange. And by the way, this pusher feel is like the smoothest of column wheel chronographs. Flipping back over again, you can see that we get a remontoir d'égalité, or a constant force device, so those enormous mainspring barrels can't overdrive the balance and cause knocking. So we have this remontoir system, despite the extraordinary power reserve and the power, I should say the potential energy in these barrels, it's going to run and keep excellent time the way any Lange would. Adjusted in a chronometer style 5 positions, you can see that there's glorious finish, mirrored ungulage, freehand engraving on the balance cock, black polish on the escape wheel cover, as well as the swan's neck regulator. You can see that there are fired blue screws, but also there are polished screws. You'll appreciate there are glasuta stripes across the bridges, and the bridges are made of nickel, copper, and zinc, also known as German silver, a material which has a natural gold hue that grows darker over time. The watch includes Lange's most advanced ever deployant clasp. It's a twin trigger release. The standard Lange deployant clasp is just friction fit, and then internally, so that it doesn't go flying, there is a locking mechanism. It's a little bit easier to open up when it's on a strap, but you can see there is a locking mechanism with spring-loaded ceramic pin snaps built in for durability, and that is what snaps shut and buckles the buckle to the strap so it can never fall off. And again, twin trigger release, so it cannot pop open by accident. We'll throw this watch on my wrist. The Lange 31 in platinum is one of the rarest modern Lange timepieces. I think you could pull it off with my wrist size, but just. It fits, but you're going to want a wrist of 16 centimeters circumference that is oval or larger. And of course, the feel is unbelievable. It's a freaking... It's a platinum flying saucer, a hockey puck made of the most noble of metals. This thing is unreal. Okay, we're up in the ante, but sticking with Lange, 100 pieces for 2018 in white gold. It's the triple split. The triple split builds on 2004's double split by giving you the ability to split the seconds, the minutes, and the hours up to 12 hours. So whereas the double split the seconds and the minutes, here I can split 2 events up to 12 hours duration. Now, there's more. The watch is surprisingly sporty for a dress watch in precious metal. It has flyback chronograph capability, so you can actually activate the flyback function. It's also a split, which you can see well here, and it has a power reserve down at the bottom, 55 hours manual wind, and as you can see, it features a tachymeter scale outboard for gauging the speed of an object as measured with the chronograph. But wait, there's more. The watch is actually fairly well loomed for what is undoubtedly a committed and sizable dress timepiece. It's got sporting pretensions. Now, the watch is 43.2 millimeters in white gold. We'll throw it on my wrist. You can see it has a nickel anthracite coating on a solid sterling silver dial base. On my wrist, it wears well. I think you're going to want to wear this on a wrist of at least my size. As with the Lange 31, it's a big timepiece. Now, while Lange claims it's close in size to the double split, my calipers indicate that they are exactly the same thickness. They're about 16 millimeters thick, both of them are, which is remarkable because this watch is more complex, and yet Lange packaged it in the same sized case. Again, 43.2 millimeters, and a very impressive watch inside and out. No compromise. Here we get a similar type of deployant clasp as the one we just saw a second ago on the Lange 31. And you can see it has the same locking mechanism built in, as well as the same triggers to ensure it pops open when you want, not when it wants. Turn it all over, and we have the caliber L132. Now, you can see there are not one, but 2 column wheels. One is the primary, and you can see the chronograph clutch moving into and out of contact. And then we have the secondary, which is operated by the split seconds control. So we have steel components in silver for the chronograph. We have those golden hued German silver components. You can see we have tons of black polish. See all the polish that turns black as I angle it through the light? All of that has been mirror polished with diamond paste. We have stripes across the bridges. We have satination across the chronograph components. Both of them feature a shining mirrored anglage on their edge, and you can really see the degree of depth as you move around this movement. That's a quality that not every high horology caliber has, and you can see how the spindly springs and levers of the split seconds mechanism have nevertheless been finished. They are both engineered components and artisanally finished components, and that is not easy to reckon. In the real world, you generally have one or the other, and it's very easy to wreck engineering with finishing, and it's very easy to dull finishing with engineering. This watch is beyond belief. But it's not the last watch of the show. Oh no, I saved the best for last. Well, I prefer the de Bethune and would rather have that out of any watch on today's show. Here we have possibly the coolest watch on today's show. Now, you know it well. This is the A. Lange & Söhne Zeitwerk date. Launched in 2019, the watch, which is 44.2 millimeters in white gold, is effectively the sequel Zeitwerk, as it gained a new movement that takes the previous 36-hour power reserve and doubles it. The power reserve is now 3 days, 72 hours. We still have stop seconds when we want it. We still have quick set of the minutes. We still have a power reserve indicator, but now we have twice the power reserve. The watch remains manually wound. There are some changes to the back. We'll get to those in a minute, but you can see that the charismatic moment for this watch has always been the triple jump, which it performs flawlessly. Now, some other refinements with this latest version, the L0438 version of the original Zeitwerk movement, we have an index that permits me to jump the hour, so I no longer have to scroll endlessly through all 60 minutes of each hour to set this watch. I can set the hour using this trigger, and then I can set the minutes using the crown. Now, I also get a system that allows me to jump the date. It is the Zeitwerk date after all. Looking carefully around the dial, you can see that we have a little red panel that jumps behind skeletonized sapphire cutouts for the date. So watch up at the top. You can see how the date jumps as I index it. See the 5 right there? Now the 5 is red. This little index lets me set the date. Turn it all over, and there have been some changes. You can see that the previous Maltese cross stopworks on the barrel is gone, replaced by 3 black polished screws and dramatic double solarization rendered by hand. You can also see that the remontoir system, which previously had a dog leg kink in it, now is a straight series of basically pivots in line. And this is the system that prevents the enormous mainspring of this watch from directly driving the escapement. This is a buffer system, so the watch maintains constant amplitude. But whereas the previous version of the remontoir in the original Zeitwerk would see about 30 to 35 degrees of balance amplitude fluctuation between each release of energy, this balance will only vary in amplitude about 5 degrees in between each release of energy. So it's a much more regular system, courtesy of a more efficient and effective remontoir constant force device, so that the watch will not run too fast when fully wound, nor will it run particularly slow when mostly discharged. It's a nice stately 18K beat rate. We have freehand engraving here as well as here, lots of black polishing, mirrored beveling on both the steel and the German silver components, and of course we have both fired blue and black polished screws, and this watch is very, 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 very special. Take one last look at it, because you will not see many like it. And as you can see, this watch appears to have been owned by someone who had no fun. Look at all the packing stickers still on the lugs and the case and the bezel. This watch was barely even taken out of the box. It'll be a hell of an opportunity for someone. Reach out, if you love this watch or any watch on this show, to tmosso@thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.